Welcome, everyone. The Center of Excellence in Smart Construction is pleased to present this virtual seminar, Integrated Project Delivery, IPD. My name is Dr. Wendu Oguda, and I'm the manager of the Center of Excellence in Smart Construction. Please note, we are recording this webinar and all lines are muted. If you need help at any time, please send us a message via the Q&A chat box below. So today's event will last up to 60 minutes. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the event. Simply type them into the Q&A chat box in the lower center of the screen, and then be sure to click the send button. Just a few acknowledgements before I hand over to Dick. We would like to acknowledge our 6 industry partners who have been integral to the development of the center and the engagement with the industry. We'd also like to acknowledge our ongoing relationships with our affiliates and our ongoing relationships with our strategic alliances. I'll now hand you over to our moderator for the webinar, Dick Bayer. Over to you, Dick.
Great, thank you, Wendu. I really appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Happy to be here. Let me just get this PowerPoint up and going. Oops. I don't know which one of these. Get it here, we'll get here. Okay, we're up and running. Thank you so much, Wendu. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with the Harriet Watt Center of Excellence in Smart Construction. Harriet Watt has been around for 200 years and carries the names of a couple of very famous scientists from the Scottish Enlightenment. And it's fantastic that the innovation continues into the Center of Excellence. So congratulations to your team, Wendu. Today, we are going to be talking about integrated project delivery, and it's integrated project delivery in action. We have a project that we're going to talk about. We're going to be focused around to show how things actually work. I'm the moderator, and I'll be presenting the first part of it, but I'm joined by my friends and collaborators, Francis Grabowski, who's Vice President of Design and Development at Mcmaster Innovation Park, which leads innovation in a whole number of areas in Hamilton, Ontario. And we're happy to be joined by Francis today. And in addition, the leader of our multiplex team on the Mcmaster Innovation Park project is Stuart McCready, who joins us from Bar Harbor, Maine today while he's on vacation. So thanks, Stuart, for actually joining in and doing that. And we're really pleased to welcome Ahmad Casey, a Senior Vice President of Project Controls at Aldar Projects. He's here to challenge everything that we say about what we're saying, because we are challenging very directly traditional project controls and how projects go forward. So thank you, Ahmad, for joining in. You have the free license to pop in and ask any questions at any point in time, because you are the provocateur, and asking the tough questions is why we're here. So thank you so much for joining us today. So we want to start with kind of a level set on what integrated project delivery is. We don't have hours and hours and hours to do it, so we will try to speed through it. But because Wendu was so expeditious with his introduction, we do have a little more time than we had counted on. And as Wendu invited you to do, we invite you as well to ask questions. You can put questions in the chat and we will try to follow them, or just hold up your hand, however it is that you want to ask the question. So the first thing we'll talk about is IPD, Integrated Project Delivery, what it is, what problems it tries to solve, and yes, go ahead. Was somebody jumping in there? Okay. What it is and what problems it tries to solve. And then we have a really great project, the MIT Omnia BioB CDMO facility. And the CDMO facility is basically one that is designed specifically to fast track scientific projects from the contract model right to operations. So the CDMO stands for, contraction and all the rest of that through operations. And we have a great one here that is basically a genetic vaccine facility, and we're building the base building for that. Francis is going to detail the story of the project for us. Stuart's going to talk about how it challenged really mainstream and traditional ways of project development, and then we'll have some observations from our team on that project and the IPD process in general. And then we'll take questions from the audience, and hopefully Ahmad will be jumping in on a regular basis saying, oh, you can't do that. Well, what about this? So thank you for that. So let's talk about integrated project delivery basics, if we can. What do we want out there in the world? Well, I think most of us would agree that we're really looking for buildings that meet our value proposition, buildings that work, buildings that can be built in a reasonable time for a reasonable cost, with the quality that's necessary to deliver the owner's value proposition, without sacrificing one or more aspects of the solution for another. We carry with us a bunch of myths in our system, a kind of mistaken belief system where we believe all kinds of things that we have found really aren't true. So competition will drive low prices. So competition, yes, often drives low prices, but at the cost of an effective project. We can effectively sell the risk of failure to others. We have developed a contracting mentality in the design and build environment that we can parse everything into 1,000 little pieces and sell the risk of the failure of each of those pieces to an individual or a small company, and then put them all back together again. And that has been proven to be very ineffective since we started doing that in 1964. It's more true that we need to align around a single project objective as a team. One of the things we have believed in, and this is part of what project management has been over the last 30 years, that we can effectively manage a project and our risks through oversight. So we can have a meeting 30 days after things have happened, and we can look at budgets 60 days after budget failures have occurred, and we can effectively fix them. So we're here to challenge that assumption. We're also here to challenge the assumption that lump sum contracts give us time certainty and give us cost certainty. So we believe those are myths in our system, and we believe that they're myths because, in fact, construction is a really complicated, complex, and chaotic area. If you think about the sheet metal mechanic having to fabricate ductwork and install that ductwork to create a complicated mechanical system, that's complicated. But when the electrician has to get in there as well, and the framer's in there as well, then we have 15 different complicated assemblies going along, and that makes it chaotic. And the current management practice that we look at only looks at transforming a clear concrete floor to one that now has a base plate on it, to one that now has framing rises, that now has in-wall rough. And we have to look at it at a much more global level to be able to manage our projects in a way that's going to make them effective. And how do we know that? Well, we've done research on this. This was a worldwide capital study back in 2012, and it's recently been updated to indicate that it's about the same. Is that most of our projects, 69%, in fact, finish over budget, and 57% finish behind schedule on new construction. And the question is, why is that? And sometimes we try to fix that by, quote, fast tracking projects. But the truth is that there's an amount of time that it takes to build a project, And there's a cost that it should take to build a project. And there's nothing fast track or slow track about that, other than the fact that we add all kinds of time and all kinds of costs that are unnecessary when we build our buildings. So the idea of the integrated project delivery model based on a lean operating system is to lean up that process and only focus on the things that give us value. And we're trying to do that in order to avoid what Ben Flyberg, who's a professor and founding chair of major program management at Oxford University in the Said Business School, says is the iron law of mega projects: over budget, over time, under quality, over and over. And he talks about why that happens. And he's just recently written a book that's going to be published in February of 2023 about how it is that we have worked in the built environment. And Daniel Kahneman, who wrote the book Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, has praised that book coming out. So look for that in your bookstores in February. So our contracts have failed us. They haven't given us the certainty that we want. Cost certainty and schedule certainty and the design build, construction manager risk, and even design bid build are less than 31% certain. They give us a 40% chance of certainty in design build. Cost reliability and schedule reliability are the same, but in the Ipd projects, we have about 95% reliability. So you can go through this slide and you can look at all the check boxes that make a more collaborative way of delivering construction projects, whether it's Ipd or alliancing or progressive design build or some of those things. It makes it more reliable, more predictable, and as a consequence, less risky. So these are the principles that we have tried to invoke on the right side that we have the check boxes for in order to fix what we think is a kind of failed system. And if you think about how we do our contracting now, we do it in a series of bilateral contracts where everybody's out for their own best interest. And yet it takes a team to build a building that doesn't leak. And this is one of these great slides that Todd Zabel put together years ago for the Lean Construction Institute, where he talks about buildings leaking at the intersection of contracts. So how do we get alignment for contracts so that we aren't forced into this idea that everybody is out for their own best interest, and we're really focusing on project first? So that's the goal of what we're trying to do, certainly in our cadence at doing integrated project delivery models. So let me just pass back this. So how does Ipd try to fix this? Well, instead of trying to sell risk competitively, we treat the project as a whole and we manage the project as a team. The misalignment of contracts represented by that leaking slide we've tried to figure that out by aligning all parties into one contract, so everybody rises and falls together. We think about managing the work not through oversight, not by looking back, but actually proactively managing it every single day. When we have a sticky on the wall about a task that needs to be done, if that task is missed, we reschedule that right away. And we don't wait for 30 days or 45 days or a recovery schedule to fix it. Quality is usually maintained in the traditional model through oversight. And yet here at every handoff between trades, because everybody rises and falls together, every trade has the responsibility of making sure that the work that it accepts has been done in the way it's supposed to be done. In the traditional bid build context, owners get a price that never goes down. And as we've seen, 70% of the time goes up, 70% or greater. In the Ipd world, the team's incentivized to deliver the project for less than what it should cost and sooner than the traditional schedule. And I'll think that you'll see through the project that Francis describes that so far we're exactly on that track. Planning and scheduling is done by critical path management. I don't want to spend the hour and a half it would take me to really beat on critical path management. But let's just say that in the lean world, in the Ipd world, we use the workers who do the work to try to figure out what the best work is in the sequence of work so that we can eliminate that space between work that always costs us money that's deeply embedded in a CPM schedule. We're trying to focus on deep collaboration instead of command and control. An interesting feature of the IPD contract is that the parties waive liability against each other, so nobody can make a claim. And that claims process, if you think about a traditional construction contract, and Ahmad, you can verify this, I'm sure, is that there's a whole cadre of people for every contractor and every trade walking around, following the work around, trying to figure out where they can make claims. Because claims are at the process of getting the contract right. So we try to get the contract price right up front, so that we don't have that. Because each of the parties acts in the silo, and they act in a very opaque way. We don't really know what their costs are or how they do things. We don't know if they're in trouble. In IPD, we know if everybody's in trouble. The entire process is transparent, costs are verified, and materials are charged the proper cost. One of the things I think we're most proud of in the Mcmaster Innovation Park project is that in our final validated target cost, almost 95% of our prices were trade confirmed, and they weren't based on an estimation process. They were really based on going to the market and figuring out what things were going to cost, which was really important in the supply chain hiccups that we're having these days. And finally, transparency of profit and gain share is really a hallmark of what the IPD process looks like. So if you book these two things together and you look at a traditional design bid build process and you look at what we're doing, you can see that we should be finishing much sooner. And if resources are fewer, then we should be finishing under what that target cost is. And we have a really interesting story about how we in fact jumped on the market and those anomalies in the market on this project that I think you'll find really interesting. So the basics of the IPD contract are that the owners of the design team, the IPD contractor, and all the trades sign one contract. The team is paid by the owner at that validated target cost, time and materials plus overhead, for all reimbursable costs. And the reason for that is to make sure that nobody ever loses the company over an IPD contract. You're never at risk to lose the company. You will always get paid for every hour that you work. You'll always get paid your overhead. The only thing you have at risk is your profit. So we set it, we liquidate that profit, which means that we set a number for what that profit is. Everybody agrees to it, and that's at risk. So the team works collaboratively to establish an expected cost. The team agrees on a lower target cost. So if we go to the market, and on this building, I think we originally thought it was going to be $53 million, and our target cost is $41 million. That's a pretty significant reduction from what our early estimation stuff was telling us. If we deliver under target cost, then savings are shared. And if it's above target cost, then profit is actually at risk and is used to pay for those overages until it's exhausted. So the reason we have one owner, one team, one contract is to align contracts to make sure that we avoid blame. We have the waiver of liability, so we don't have claims. T&M, as I said, means that you don't risk the company. And target cost really aligns the focus of the team. And I think we have found that. So let's move on to the story now that we have a kind of level set on what integrated project delivery is. And I'll turn it over to Francis. And you just give me a little ding when you want to move to the next slide.
Okay, I'll give you a virtual ding.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. That was a great introduction to IPD. Thanks, Dick. So speaking about Mcmaster Innovation Park, so I'm going to step back a little bit. And Mcmaster University is actually a separate entity to Mcmaster Innovation Park. So Mcmaster Innovation Park was brought to fruition in 2005 to act as an independent entity, arm's length to Mcmaster University, to be able to operate as a private sector. So we really do operate in the private sector world. Mcmaster University is one of the top University of Life Science Engineering Advanced Manufacturing. So at MIP, what we focus on is to bring innovation, research from the university to the market. So we're a bridge between academia and industry. So it's a lower risk for investments for government and private investors alike. Can you go to the next slide, Dick? Bing. So as I said, MIP acts as a bridge between academia and industry. And it's to support researchers that are coming out of the university. One of the things in 2019, when we decided that we needed to review our master plan, there was a huge demand for space. We're very good at incubator space and startups at the Mcmaster Innovation Park currently in our current buildings, but it was important to start looking at what we call step-up space. So where can companies go to grow? And the issue really was, and is in Canada and around the world really, that there are no spaces in that 10,000 square feet to 50,000 square feet for companies to be able to grow. And what was happening was we were losing a lot of our intellectual property to other locales. So MIP embarked on this master plan vision, which is to bring these spaces in our park and provide that collision and support for these companies to be able to grow. So it's a big part of Hamilton and the Innovation District. Mcmaster Innovations Park's kickoff project, if you like. We do have current existing buildings that we have our startups and different companies in, but this Omnia Bio B is the first project of this building's 100,000 square feet, and we're looking to expand to 1.3 plus million square feet. Omnia Bio B is an interesting story only in that a lot of people say, well, why are we building B before we build A? And there's actually a story behind that. When we started A and working on A and working actually with the this IPD team design in a design build format, we looked at Omnia A, which is 300,000 square foot clinical and commercial manufacturing for cell and gene therapy for Omnia Bio. And what happened was they needed something built faster. So, and that is where the IPD really shows its value. So we started this building. It's a commercial clinical manufacturing space on the ground level for cell and gene therapy. And for those of you that don't know, Omnia Bio is actually a spin-off of CCRM. So Omnia Bio is the for-profit company spin-off, one of, and CCRM is a not-for-profit.
And CCRM is a Canadian government-sponsored nonprofit, right, Francis?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And Omnia Bio is the spin-off for the for-profit entity. So they're doing their clinical trials small scale clinical trials in Mars, downtown Toronto, and we're approximately 45 minutes from downtown Toronto. So so this building allows them to build a larger scale clinical manufacturing, and then actually Omnia A, which will happen once Omnia B is up and running, will be the next step for Omnia Bio in going to a commercial manufacturing process. So one of the, sorry.
I said cool.
Okay. So one of the things that for the challenges of the project, as I mentioned already, was we need to open very quickly. The demand for space, one, and also the demand for the therapeutic cell lines that Omnia Bio is working on needs a facility, needs to be on the market and up and running for in 2024. So that was a very compressed timeline for the project. So we chose a site that we could build easily, slab on grade, fairly flat. We're actually on an industrial property, so it's brownfield. So we have considerations. So it was one of the locations where we knew we didn't have any impacts environmentally and geotechnically. The supply chain issues, of course, we're all dealing with supply chain issues across the world, steel delivery being a big one. So we actually, one of the challenges is how do we get the steel structure designed in order to do early procurement. Air handlers are the other one. Life science spaces and laboratory spaces are very high level air, mechanical, electrical systems. And then of course, trying to land on what the actual building is going to cost and keep it under control through the escalating and unpredictable market that we're in right now.
So thank you, Francis. Let's turn it over to Stuart to talk about some of these challenges that we talked about. Steel, we talked about air handlers, but there were a number of challenges you needed to deal with on this project. But let's take a look at the kind of traditional timeline, Stuart, and jump in there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And thanks, Francis, for the introduction on that one. I guess the traditional process, and I guess we'll walk through that in a couple of slides' time, is more about how the IPD process has allowed us, and I know Dick doesn't like the phrase, but to fast track it to allow us to meet our timelines. It was very obvious from the beginning a traditional construction project wouldn't allow us to meet our deliverables, basically. So in a traditional sense, you go through your design phases, as Dick had in an earlier slide, and you get to the end of design and then you proceed into construction, and you have a little bit of overlap in procurement in that timeline. So for example, if you walk through here, you've got your initial kind of indicative timelines of 3 months for schematic design, another couple of months for detailed design after that, and then your IFC drawings, which are kind of coordinated within that phase, right? And then you have your tender for construction through your owner at the end of that period. And then for us, for example, because we were proceeding so quickly, we had a lot of issues in the market at the time through the supply chain. So add the end of COVID to our issues, you include the recent war that has been going on, and it's been a very complicated process for us and our owner at MIP through understanding, okay, how do we deliver this as quickly as possible? And Francis mentioned Omnia A and Omnia B. We traditionally went in with a design build submission for A, and then when we were told Omnia B was in line, we went through an IPD process because we thought it was best aligned to suit the needs of the client and also the delivery of the project. So for this updated kind of IPD process and timeline, what we did is we obviously pulled the team together, and within a couple of months, we were able to focus on specifically designing the steel structure. So we went through a choosing by advantages process where we understood, okay, what is the quickest procurement method if we can design the frame? And at the time, concrete delivery timelines were very long in Canada, especially in Ontario. So we proceeded to partner with a local Hamilton steel supplier who was able to, join our team as part of the IPD process and now allow us to design, work in collaboration, and actually be able to meet our timelines that we needed to erect the steel at site. So things like, as Francis mentioned earlier, key supply chain issues were in the mechanical and electrical areas. So things like air handlers had a crazy long lead time that we had to manage. And by focusing on identifying those air handlers specifically early, we were able to design those, get those ordered, and pre-ordered a long time before a traditional model would allow you to do that. And I should note that obviously, I don't think Dick specifically went through it before, but the IPD model means that you have your owner, your contractor, your designers, and your trades all part of the same team. So you have that integration, and the fact that MIP was so willing and so involved with this project has allowed us to be so successful in the delivery so far. So this is a perfect example of, I guess, a rough side-by-side timeline on, I guess, those previous slides in terms of your traditional model, getting that design done. We understand that something's potentially an issue later on. We have to issue change orders, and then you end up delivering a project a lot later than you could through the IPD model, where you have all those unknowns up front. You work with the client. We get to the delivery point through our validation process, and we're actually able to procure and start construction a lot earlier than a traditional method, which has definitely been evident because we are now on site. We have our foundations being actually formed and poured as of next week. So we're on time for this current fast track.
Cool. Thank you, Stuart. Let's hand it back to Frances for her observations and some of the things that, and I mean, she was the architect, she's the person that pulled the trigger on the IPD process. So it's really interesting, likely for Ahmad, especially Frances, and owners out there, how you made the decision to kind of pull that trigger.
Thanks. Thank you, Dick and Stuart. So for an owner, there's a couple of things that you need to look at. And number one is we're not suggesting that IPD is the only contract method that's suitable for every project. If you have a simple project that's not complicated, that you don't have procurement issues, that you have more time to be able to deliver the project, and it's a simple build, then like an office building, it's a good example, then you may not want to use an IPD process. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And one of them is that the owner needs to be involved, especially at the beginning, heavy loading for an owner. So one of the two things that I have to say about that is executive buy-in. You need to, whether it's your board of directors, whether it is university, whether it is your CEO, your CFO, your operations people, everyone needs to be on board. And the best way to do that is, one, make sure that all of those people understand the differences between the projects and why you would choose an integrated project delivery instead of a construction management at risk. So having them doing a scoring and actually looking at choosing an IPD for a particular project is very, very important in that they will look at it as in their own perspective. So in other words, your CFO is not going to be looking necessarily whether or not the system is collaborative. Your CFO is going to look at risks, and the most important item for them is risks, and they're going to score that on a scoring matrix higher than the high performance, whereas your operations facilities manager is going to look at high performance and quality of the building as a higher scoring matrix. So it's important that everyone is involved in making the decision, because you're getting buy-in from the very beginning. And that was important on a couple of projects. This isn't the first project that we've done as an IPD at MIP, but it was very important that everyone is involved and understands the differences between the contract structures and has the ability to provide the scoring. The other piece that's very important is conditions of satisfaction, and making sure that the team understands, but also always looks back at the conditions of satisfaction. What did we say from the first day, and what did the owner say the deliverables were? And so that's highly important, and it's in front of you every day, and every team member and every construction person in the trailer that comes on site says, oh, you know what, let's not forget that net zero is important. Let's not forget that the owner wants a high class caliber building. And I wanted to mention one other thing about the conditions of, conditions of satisfaction, yes, but also choosing by advantages is also the tenant who's actually going to be using this building. So the users in the space are also involved right from the beginning. So they are at the table. They are part of making these decisions and understanding what the core values are. So is it a cost effective? Is it wellness for the building? What are those conditions? What are those deliverables? And they're front and foremost in everyone's mind every single day. But the other thing is you need to be able to revisit and you need to be nimble. So things change, the schedule, we need to do a full planning, well, all different things that need to happen to make the project and land where it needs to be, that it functions and that it's a quality building for the park, so state-of-the-art facility, as well as it's on schedule and it's on budget. So there's so many things that are important, and you kind of rate those as the most important through this condition of satisfaction. So as an
So
owner,
I think what you said,
sorry, just one more thing, Dick. I wanted to go back
Oh.
to the most important
Oh,
is
okay.
the amount of effort that's required by
Go
the
ahead.
owner to be at the table. Sorry, go ahead, Dick. Uh-oh.
Okay, so thank you, Francis. I just wanted to add to your high level, your executive buy-in and how important that was. Because here we had, as you said, we had the tenant that's going to use the space. You had some financing that needed to be secured for that. You had your partner at Mcmaster University. So I think we ended up doing 4 different presentations about what IPD is to try to get people comfortable with what their role was going to be and how they had to interact with things, and then how we developed the risk register and the opportunity log. So all those things were really, really important here. Let's move to Stuart for his observations as a rookie, as an alumni of working in Dubai in the Middle East, and as really the lead design manager on this project from the team's perspective, not just the multiplex perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Dick. No, I chuckle to myself because we have these separate slides saying owner and contractor's obligation, observations, not obligations. But it's actually a very collaborative approach, and both of you hit the nail on the head without the owner being so involved. And this process allows the owner to be integrated in that design process while also illustrating, hey, these are our core values, this is what it needs to represent. And having their seat at the table has made this project what it is today, basically, which has been fantastic for us. I think from a contracting point of view, having the design team, the owner, our trades all on board from the beginning has made a massive difference, right? Having that waiver of liability means that the traditional model of, okay, you do the design is in, the consultant's responsibility. If they get anything wrong, then basically it's a change order at the end of the day. But with the IPD approach is we've found people are a lot more collaborative. They're willing to point out potentially not mistakes, but issues that would arise traditionally that you wouldn't actually catch or point out until later because it's not people's responsibility to. Where in this approach it is, because the team is bought in, our profit is all at risk at the end of the job together. So you get a lot more of a collaborative model and you eliminate waste. There is a lot of efficiency that comes out of this process. And that's also having your trades on board early, because at the end of the day, as Dick said about trying to prefabricate, including the last planner system, so you'll only have work ready when people have the supply chain and things are going to be produced and delivered at site, right? So you don't have wastage of people turning up, sitting around, where traditionally that'll happen. You'll have someone install ductwork, and then the following process in the construction model, they might not start for another like 3 weeks. So having the ability to have our trades on board early says, okay, I'm going to do it this way. This is how I want to package my work. And that integration is invaluable, basically, at the end of the day. And it allows you to reduce wastage, create efficiency, that is generally not seen in the construction industry, especially in my time, and I guess what I've seen globally as well. So I guess in a very short pitch, those are the key observations from my end. That it's really a hell of a lot more of a collaborative approach, and allows, as I say, the owner to be involved.
So Ahmed has his hand up. Ahmed.
Hi again. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for the explanation that you have provided. To be honest, I felt like I am an old schooler, being a follower of the traditional methodologies of construction. And well, I really hope that I'll have the opportunity to use or make the use of the integrated project delivery methodology. I just had like a couple of questions about the deployed methodology. And the first one is regarding the contractual aspect of it, or the contractual governance of the process. So traditionally, in the past, we are still using FIDIC contracts. And such contracts, as you all know, it does govern the relationship between contractor and client, basically, with also clarification of the engineer's role as well. So how does IPD process gets governed from a contractual perspective? And the second question is about the cost and the cost accuracy, and at which stage, I would say, you will have that accurate cost that you can tell how much am I going to deliver this project for, how much is it going to cost me. And apologies if I interrupted you, Stuart, while you were talking.
No problem. That's fine.
No, I think Stuart was he was just wrapping up. So, and we have a question in the chat that goes right to what you had raised, Ahmed, about forms of contract. So, the two questions you had were really the forms of contract governance and structure. So to answer the question in the chat, there were about 5 different really well-known contract models that are form contracts, basically, for the delivery of IPD projects. In Canada, we use something called CCDC 30, which is sponsored by a group that was formed by the Construction Association years ago to develop standard contracts. In the US and Western Canada, they use the Howard Ashcraft model, which is a model that's been developed by Hanson Bridge at his law firm, and that's a widely used contract. The Associated General Contractors in the States have developed a model called Consensus Docs 300. And then the American Institute of Architects have developed another contract called their 191 series or C191 series. So all of these are available. I'll write down those references in the chat. The contractual structure in each is very similar. There's a senior management team that's made up of a representative of every partner. And their job is to make sure that the team is empowered to do the work that they need to do and to resolve any disputes. The heart of the work is done by the project management team. There's a person represented from each IPD partner on the project management team. They're the ones that authorize the spending of money and what work gets done, and hiring of lump sum trades and things like that. We have taken the stand that we need a project core group, because we have, I think, 17 or 18 partners, and it's easier to manage with a representative of the designers, with Francis's participation there, Stuart representing the IPD contractor. My team is on there as the IPD advisor, and we have a representative from the trades, and that helps us do the daily administrative work. But the core team isn't empowered necessarily to spend money or any of those things. Everything needs to be okayed by the PMT. And the owner sits on the PMT, so they effectively have a veto on the PMT and both at the senior management team, so it doesn't go wild. We haven't had any vetoes on this project yet, and so we're feeling good about that. So that's the structure. If that answers that question, Ahmad. Like I said, I'll type into the chat what those things are. So I want to go back to this slide because I think, and maybe Stuart can talk about this. This shows the point in which, like 7 months into the project, when the parties agreed in the validation report on the costs. So Stuart, you might want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in terms of your question about estimating, right? It's at this point in time, because we collaborated early, that the point in transition, you have a validation period where you set a target cost for the project, right? And from that point in time, that is your target cost that we're aiming to achieve by the end of the job. And that still includes value engineering opportunities that you work to complete as you finish the detailed design, right? But during the phase from the beginning, we have our own estimating team on board who develops the estimate as we go, right? So we tried to do a parametric kind of estimating process through this, where when we evaluated each of the options, we said, okay, this is the indicative cost, for example, for steel, for a concrete structure for this. And that is through, indicative sketches and things like that. For our project specifically, because it was a low-rise commercial building, this was an easy approach for us. So for initial sketches, indicative kind of steel beam sizes, column sizes, we could do all that on the fly, right? So the actual estimate at the end of the day, Dick said we were about 95% trade-backed pricing on our target cost, because one, we had the mechanical and electrical trades on board, we had the steel trade on board, and we also had the facade trade on board, which includes in Canada waterproofing, roofing, your envelope, your glazing, right? So effectively that's 70% of your job, and plus we had several other trades that we got pricing from in the market, right? So early on in the piece, when we have that validation report, we've already completed that initial costing for the project to set up the target cost. So from that target cost, effectively we put our profit at risk, right? So within that allotted project value, the team's profit is included in that. So for example, if we exceed that target cost, we lose our profit, but we still get paid for the work that we do, right? And that's how the model works. It means that we are incentivized to create more value engineering items for the project to make it more efficient. And also that comes down to the last planar system and efficiently constructing that site as well, right? Less people, less cost, better for the job, better for the owner at the end of the day.
Fantastic. So thank you for that. We got a couple other questions. Well, here's one for you, Stuart. Since you worked in the GCC, what are you thinking the biggest obstacles are to implementing IPD in the area?
I think one will particularly be the buy-in of the ownership structure. So not having a lot of experience in the IPD model will make it a little bit more difficult. So for example, we had a very well bought in owner through Francis, who is very well versed in the IPD process, right? And seeing it work, going through that, you really have to believe in that. And you also have to get complete owner buy-in, right? Like we needed Francis to be at the weekly meetings that we had to make decisions so they could be made within the right time frame so we could proceed as quickly as possible, right? That would be my biggest, I guess, implementation issue, is potentially getting that owner buy-in. But apart from that, I think you have the existing trade relationships there that would happily buy into this process. You have contractors that already go through a design build process in the market. So that is the only kind of little piece that if you get the ownership buy-in from the beginning and they have a dedicated person within that project structure, I think that would be a very successful way to implement it in the GCC.
Okay, we've got some other questions here. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. So there's another question from my friend Yaman, who asks, since the parties set target cost, is there a risk they'll try to set it too high to make their lives easy? What control does the owner have on that? Well, the owner is part of the team that decides on what the target cost is, and we had some tough negotiations around that here. Maybe you can address that, Francis. I think your input on that would be really interesting.
Thank you. It's a good question, actually, because you know, that is the thought, in that you would add all of these contingencies on top of the trade partner's costs, and that's how traditionally you would carry those numbers. In this case, what happens is we don't actually use the traditional, you know, 10% or 15% contingency, but also we were looking at a pro forma. So our pro forma tells us what we need to spend per square foot on this building. So you're really, you know, before we enter into this contract, you really understand your costs as an owner in what you can afford to build and what's going to make the numbers work and how you're going to amortize that over time, whether it's through your lease agreements or however. But I think that the most important thing is that being at the table, and when the numbers started coming in higher, we had to really kind of pick apart the risks. And one of the things that we use is a risk register, which is critically important. We haven't really talked about that, but you identify all the unknowns. So in a traditional sense, you would not do that. So especially underground. So until you're out of the ground, you have unknowns. So we carried in our contingency a risk register that actually identifies those. And we were able to work through that and do studies ahead of time, whether geotechnical, drop boreholes, do some tests on site, move soil, in order to really remove some of those risks so that we had the right number. And like I think everyone is saying, and Stuart mentioned a few times, my being at the table or having an owner rep at the table so that you're there every single day is critically important in managing that budget.
I think just one little bit to add to that as well, Francis, is that the whole budget is an open book process. Like Francis sees everything from the beginning as prices come in, and we work together to manage that budget. That's what critically is different from the traditional method to this IPD, is it's all open book.
So I found a risk register slide from our validation report. Hopefully you can see that. And this is what Francis was talking about. So contingency, and I think this is really important, Ahmad, as a controls guy, contingency is not 5% or 8% or 12%. Contingency is every priced risk. So the team goes through this risk register. We had 3 pages of this risk register. And we go through this is the opportunity register, but we had the risk register actually is this one. But we had both a risk register and an opportunity register. And so we go through and we price the cost of those risks, and we carry that as the contingency. And I think that's what's unique about this process. The other thing is we carried the opportunity register, which I had just shown there. And we identified a number of opportunities, and we finally, we were bouncing back and forth on the opportunities until we got the tenant in the room for about a 5-hour session. And we started going through, because he had his own set of designers and other people that were a little more traditional. We got him in the room because we couldn't get his people to agree to these things. So we got him in the room. You got to go to the power source. And I think he agreed to almost every one of the opportunities that we had, which allowed us to cut that target cost by $2.5 or $3 million, I think. So that's another important observation. So we're down to 5 minutes left. I think this is when I think we've answered all the questions. If you have any other questions, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, I think I want to thank our panelists. Thanks, Francis, for the time. I know this is a busy schedule and this is a big room day, so we're playing hooky from the big room. Ahmad, thank you so much for your observations, and we want to we want to be able to work with you and get you the experience of doing an IPD. In the
Looking
GTA.
forward.
And Stuart, thank you for taking time from your vacation. I know that you and your wife are enjoying the fall foliage, and so now you can go back to enjoying it. Wendy, I'll turn it back over to you. Oh, we've got one more question here. There was one question, Stuart, about project safety index. Is that something that we use in Canada? And are you expecting that project safety is going to be higher?
It's something that we don't use specifically in Canada. It's just different, but it's similar model. But in terms of constructing and designing more safely, yes, because you can focus on obviously prefabricating sections, for example, on the ground. I mean, we don't have that for our project, but you can particularly focus on safety a lot better through this process, that's for sure.
All right, one final question from Nahal. Says that in his experience, design duration is the same in both methods. So how does IPD help to shorten the time for design? So I think we had a really great experience. What happens is typically you do schematic designs, you do 100% of the building in schematics, and then you do 100% of the buildings in design development, you do 100% of the building. You go on and on and on. Here we just skipped right to the steel structure. We knew that was the lead time. So design time was actually substantially shorter here because we were focusing on the work that released work. So hopefully that answers your question. Back to you, Wendy, with 3 minutes left.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dick, and all the panelists for such an interesting discussion. I just want to alert everyone to our next webinar, which is titled Deployment of Integrated Project Delivery Towards Successful Delivery of Net Zero Projects. And that will be taking place sometime in November 2022. More details to follow from our contact email address that you see on the screen. So that just leads me to conclude today's program, to thank our speakers and the audience. You may now disconnect. Thank you and have a good day, everybody. Bye.
So much.
Thanks so much, everybody. Adios.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye.
Adios.